Welcome to EventUp, the place where people enthusiastic about events stay in the know on the latest trends within the events industry. Live, hybrid, and virtual experiences. From virtual events to conferences, award galas, and everything in between. Here's your host, Amanda Ma.
Welcome everyone. My name is Sara Rosas. I'm Revenue Director at Innovate Marketing Group, and I'm very thrilled to host today's special episode celebrating Black History Month. This episode is extra special as it marks the start of something new. Moving forward, I'll be co-hosting EventUp alongside our amazing Amanda Mom, and we're just so excited to bring you even more engaging conversations, so stay tuned. I want to give a shout out before we start to FeedSpot for featuring our EventUp podcast as number 3 in their top event industry podcasts. And we're so excited to be featured on this list. And we're very happy that this podcast is resonating with so many of you. So now let's get into the good part. Joining us today, we have Deidra Green. She is VP Field Performance and Inclusion at European Wax Center. She is amazing. She is a licensed esthetician, MBA, APHR, author, and VP of Field Marketing Performance and Inclusion at European Wax Center. I mean, what can't she do? She oversees field training, industry relations, and learning and development, ensuring top talent is attracted, equipped, and supported. Deidra also leads DEI strategy, implementing initiatives aligned with EWC's values. Care, integrity, guest delight, and having fun while being awesome. So welcome to the show, Deidra. We are so excited to talk to you.
Oh gosh, I almost wish I didn't send over my bio because I'm like, who is that? Who's that person that they're talking about? It always sounds like I should be looking behind me, but I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I mean, that's so wonderful that you even amaze yourself, and you're so talented and a multi-hyphenate, and we're so excited to have you here because we definitely love just enhancing and giving a platform to all of these amazing people that we meet on our daily basis, and we're so excited to have you. So thank you for coming.
Yes,
I want to give
I'm very humbled to be here.
Oh my gosh, no, we're so lucky to have you. So yeah, let's kick us off with a brief overview of your background. Tell us a little bit more about your history. I have a lot of friends in your field of DIB and field training, and I feel like there's always a fun backstory. So please give us a little background.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, now currently I'm the VP of Field Performance and Inclusion at European Wax Center. So prior to that, I actually, like my first grown-up job, I guess you could say, out of college, I used to work in finance for a large bank, and it just, I was good at it. It just wasn't something that I really, was filling my cup per se. So I decided to leave there and pursue my esthetician's license. And that kind of led me to opening my own business. I had my own business for about 3 years. And then I, took 6 months off and was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I love being an esthetician. I love, how this fills my cup. And I found an opportunity at European Wax Center, and I loved their business model, and I loved, that I got to still be an esthetician. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And I've been with the brand ever since in various different ways. And, the thing that excites me the most, I would say, about, being with European Wax Center is that they truly do see me as an individual and are able to tap into various talents that I have and allow me to let myself show up in those ways to impact the business in a positive way. And that's why I've been here so long. And to me, that is the essence of why DE&I is so important.
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, it's very near to my heart as well. I also come from a diverse background, and I feel like we have so much more to show for than just, of course, our background. And it makes me feel so happy to hear that you're in a place where you're valued and appreciated and really seen for who you are. Now that, we're talking about it and you're in this privileged position. What does
Mm-hmm.
inclusion mean to you, and why do you think it's valuable and vital, really, for companies who want to have a thriving culture?
Inclusion for me means comfort. So I feel like when I'm comfortable, I can contribute freely, I can challenge. I guess maybe a better term for it might be psychological safety, or the one that I guess that resonates with me the most. That term is was coined by Amy Edmondson, and she describes it as a like a felt permission for candor. And I think that's really important because it allows me to speak up, share, my perspective on different ideas, different things that the company might be doing. I can share pitfalls, like when I see something might be coming down the pipe that I'm like, wait, hold on, but did we think about it from this perspective? And it allows me to make mistakes. And that is, what really teaches you and what allows you to grow within an organization is the idea that you can make that mistake or you can take a risk without feeling like, okay, this is going to result in a negative consequence for me. And I think if you have everyone in your organization feeling that way, then you're going to get the best out of all of your employees or associates or however, you refer to them all the time. So for me, comfort is what inclusion means to me. I'm not always second guessing myself or trying to shrink myself or trying to hold back or wondering how is this going to impact me? Should I say this? Should I say that? That's what inclusion really, really means to me.
Oh my gosh. So honestly, like, I am so inspired by what you just said. I feel like one of the things that really resonated with me is that you cannot really hope that your team is going to thrive if you're not making them feel comfortable. Like, could you even
Hmm.
imagine? Like, that's not possible. So it highly resonates with me because I have a team and I
Hmm.
hope to provide that comfort and that level of seeingness, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to be intentional about providing that comfort, right? Like a lot of people will assume that everything's going okay because nobody said anything. But if you don't create that space to welcome and invite the conversation about how people are feeling on your team, then you don't really know. You have to be intentional about in checking in and ensuring that that's the environment that you're creating. So that's what I'll say about that. Yeah.
I love that. You have to be intentional because guess
Hmm.
what? Your needs to feel comfortable may not be the same ones as someone else in your team. They may
Yep.
have different, like, dietary needs. Like, it can be
Yeah.
just as easy as simple as that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I love that you brought up an example of dietary needs because it opens up the conversation around, I think a lot of times when you think about DE and I, we just think about the things that we can see, but it really is about all the invisible identities that we carry as well. And so, when people say, oh, DE and I is, it's not for me, or, it's not speaking to me. It's truly is speaking to everyone because we all carry invisible identities. We all carry things with us that shape the way that we see the world. And if we don't allow each other the space to understand each other's perspectives, not that I have to change my perspective, but I understand where you're coming from. And so that will allow us to work better together. It allows me to see you as a person, and it helps us come together with the best of the intentions and the best of our skill sets.
I love that answer. Now that you're leading me, honestly, like, what am I even here for? You led me perfectly to my next question, which is, can you share an example? You mentioned earlier how you can even talk about, like, what's not going great. So can
Yeah.
you give us an example of how inclusion and belonging have made a positive impact in employee morale or
Mhm.
productivity? Tell us a little more.
Absolutely. So when we were building out kind of the programs that we have at European Wax Center and we really wanted it to start with a conversation. So we're like, we have to create a space where we can welcome different types of conversations that people want to participate in, that they feel, again, comfortable with joining. So we have something called Media Club, which is one of my favorite parts of our DEI program that we have at European Wax Center. We allow people to give suggestions of different pieces of media that they want to discuss. It could be an article, it could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be a YouTube clip, anything. We talk about television shows, Netflix shows, anything that they want to bring to discuss, and we create questions, and we just open up this space once a month where we kind of share our different perspectives of whatever piece of media that is. And so it's completely optional, but we have about a quarter or a fifth of the company join every single time that we have it. And I think that's a great stat that, people are coming and they're showing up, no matter how busy their calendars are, they're making time for it once a month to say, hey, I want to come and I want to join this conversation. I'm there, as a mediator to help mediate the conversation. And we kind of set ground rules around it of how we're going to speak to each other. And everyone always says, wow, I learned so much from that conversation. I didn't understand, that perspective. And now I understand it a little bit better now. And it has helped people to form relationships across the organization with people that they would not normally have worked with. So I think that's a win when people are starting to connect, especially in an environment that can be hybrid at times. Like sometimes we're in the office, sometimes we're virtual. We have a large portion of our populations that is out in the field doing field work because we're training. So, to kind of have that space where we can come together and talk about something other than work really helps to make people feel comfortable. They feel boosted. They feel a part of something bigger than themselves. And it gives them a space to connect with people on topics that are more than just what's on their desk. So that is one place that I feel like we've really been able to improve morale and just connection in the workplace.
Oh my gosh, that sounds, first of all, super fun. I want to be invited. Second, some of the things that I picked up from what you said is that, yes, what we mentioned about being super intentional and having that platform provided. And of course, you want to have everything like laid out for your team to take advantage of it. But you need buy-in. You need collaboration. You want people to feel welcomed, that they can participate. A quarter of the company, that's crazy. Like you and I need to talk about engagement later on a later conversation, but that is so fun. And yes, this is something that people will do on top of their regular activities. So I'm so happy to hear that you have a program that's in place, that's regular. That's not something you guys do once a year. Like,
yes, exactly.
Some people we won't talk about. But yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm so happy to hear that you have such high engagement and that your team is really taking advantage of that program, because yes, it brings education, it brings people together, it creates team building opportunities, and just being able to connect on a personal level, on a human level, right?
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned not doing it just once a year. I think you have to give people multiple opportunities to engage and different ways to engage. And that is part of the inclusivity part of it, right? Because recognizing that everyone is on different levels of their journey is an important piece of the conversation. So I might not be at the point where I'm ready to join a media club, but hey, I noticed that you put something in the newsletter every single week around DE&I and how to foster a more inclusive environment. And I'm reading that every single week. Nobody else has to know about it, but you're giving that nudge, you're making that difference, and you're allowing people to engage in a way that feels safe for them, that they will be ready to join media clubs. So I think that's really important, to have ways for your associates to engage on several different levels, and in ways that are sometimes mandatory, sometimes optional, because it allows them to make a choice, right? And I think a lot of times companies will try to force certain things. And then there's immediately, when you try to force something, there's resistance, right? Because nobody likes being told what to do. So part of understanding and building out a good DEI program is understanding how people's brains just work in general. So I think that's something that has to be invited into the conversation also.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips or best practices I heard that you guys recently had a offsite event, and I would love to hear how you make these opportunities for in-person connection more inclusive or more meaningful.
I'm a big proponent of co-creating experiences. So I ask a lot of questions. Like, I don't feel like I need like pride and authorship or ownership over an event to say,
Mm.
I'm going to plan this and I'm going to keep it to myself and everybody's going to love it once we get there. It's like, no, just ask some questions. Like, what do you guys want to do? What it would be important for you to get out of this event? What do I need to consider when planning this event for you? You brought up dietary restrictions before. If you don't know that somebody on your team is vegan, they're going to feel left out of the event, you know? So I think it's important that when you're planning, you know, an experience, that you co-create it alongside your team, because you might be thinking something and they might be thinking something totally different. A lot of times we can be on opposite ends of the spectrum of our expectations and objectives of what we're trying to get done as a part of the event. Like, are we skill building? Are we just trying to build connection? Are we, you know, by the end of this, do we want to have like direction for the year? Like, what is it that we're trying to get out of this event? And then what's the way in which we get there? And I think the more that you ask questions and the more that you take on the feedback from your team, the more inclusive it will be, right? Because everybody had a say in how it came together.
I love that. And I feel like we also try to do the same when doing events for our clients. Try to
Mm-hmm.
understand who's attending, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can even have, sometimes we do even have surveys, like pre-event surveys that will ask
Mm-hmm.
people for their dietary restrictions, if
Mm-hmm.
they have any accessibility needs, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things you can take into account
Yep.
before
Mm-hmm.
the event, right? To make sure
Exactly.
that the program is inclusive. So thank you
Yes,
for
I
sharing
love a
that.
survey. I love a survey.
Yeah.
The more pre-event, post-event, the middle of it, I'm like pulse checks, whatever it is. I love all of those tools. Yep.
Feeling the strain of event organizing? Say goodbye to stress with the expertise of Innovate Marketing Group at your service. Whether it's influencer events, corporate extravaganzas, or impactful summits, we craft authentic connections that last. Reach out to us and let's schedule a game-changing conversation.
I think that's because you actually care. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another point that we need to touch on. If you actually care about your team, and we've talked about this in other conversations with Amanda, when you actually care, you put in the work. It doesn't mean you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be perfect. And I know that it can
Exactly.
be kind of daunting for people, like just, or companies just joining on
Mm-hmm.
DIB and or sustainability, whatever it is that you're trying to do a little bit better. Just care, ask
Yeah.
your people, ask your
Mm-hmm.
team, and you'll be guided and you'll do
Yeah.
better each time.
And it's a yeah, if you when you care, it's not a checkbox exercise, right? It's like, no, oh, we got to get something out, we just got to do this, you know, this
Mm,
thing, so we can say that we did it. And then because you ask so many questions, when you make mistakes, right, people forgive you for them
yeah.
because they know that they saw the effort that you put in to make sure, and then you just learn from it, right, and you add it to the next one. So I think a lot of times people are really afraid to make mistakes, especially in the area of DE and I, because they tie it to, like, you know, their morality, right? It's like, oh, I tried to do this thing and I forgot this group, or I forgot, you know, this person. And you feel like, oh my gosh, they must think I'm horrible, or I must be a horrible person that I didn't even consider them. And it's not, you can't take that on. You just have to say, thank you so much for sharing that with me, and I will, you know, make sure that I incorporate that next time. But if people don't feel that level of comfort that they can share because you didn't
Mm,
ask them, then you'll never know. So that's why I think it's important to just ask the question.
absolutely. And I think you're kind of like leading us now into saying that inclusion makes for a better workplace culture
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah.
makes for a better environment for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Alrighty. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now that we're in February, we're celebrating Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that companies can do to celebrate Black History Month or any other celebration in an authentic and impactful way?
So I think when we use the word authentic, it's important to understand that what's authentic for one company might not be authentic for another company. So if you haven't
Mm,
done the work to understand your company culture enough to know what would be authentic for a Black History Month celebration, then you have to start there, right? So if you never do anything else around DE&I or Heritage Months or anything like that throughout the entire year, and then all of a sudden these months come up and then you're just throwing something up there, anything that, whatever you do, it's not going to feel authentic because you're relegating it to that month. You're not talking about it any other time of the year. So it's anything that you do, whether people loved it or they didn't, it's going to feel inauthentic, right? Because it's not a part of who you are as a brand. So I think it's really important to understand where your company culture is at and go from there. You have to craft that experience to know what will feel authentic for you. And again, it starts with asking the question, right? It starts with conversations that may feel uncomfortable. It starts with providing people some options. What is available to me? What are you willing to do, right? As a company, like maybe, some people are willing to shut down for the day. Is that something that's available to us? Are you gonna spend money on a guest speaker? What is available? So I think it's important to understand what your options are as a company, and then what your company culture truly is to design an event that feels authentic, or an acknowledgement that feels authentic to you.
Absolutely. And you kind of reminded me that some of our, some clients sometimes reach out and they say, hey, we really want to do something for Black History Month or Latinx Month. And we're always saying, like, yes, we would love to help you plan an event for Black History Month, but what else do you celebrate? Is this going to make people feel singled out?
Yeah.
Or is it going to create a culture that's, inclusive for everyone? Because then if you know your team, and this is what we've been saying, get to know your team, know your demographics, so that you can kind of accommodate. Of course, you're not going to celebrate every single,
exactly.
culture there is.
Yes. And people don't know what to celebrate because I'm like, well, do you know who's in the room? Like there's a holiday literally, or something you can acknowledge every day of the year, multiple that you can acknowledge every single day of the year. What's important to your team? Like who's in the room on your team? You know what I mean? So I think, again, it just goes back to knowing your people. And that's a year round, all the time, something that never dies, because your team is going to grow. It's going to evolve. People are going to leave. New people are going to come in. So what is the mechanism that you're making sure that you're staying engaged with, or keeping your finger on the pulse of your organization?
Absolutely. And now I'm going to do a shameless plug, because our team creates every year a DEIB calendar, an inclusion calendar. And so that's just a free tool that you can get. I will ask my team to put it in the show notes so that anyone listening can get that calendar. And so, you don't have to do any research. That is all of the official dates plus all of the inclusive dates. So you can get that for free on the show notes. So
love it.
Thank you for allowing me to brag about my team.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you a little bit more, because you're in such a good position to talk about leadership and to talk about how the inclusive culture can come from the top to the bottom. So how can an organization, from your experience, ensure that they are genuinely representing diverse backgrounds at their, workplace or in their leadership teams, not only at the bottom?
I think that, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So one of the ways that we have done it is we have a mentorship program at European Wax Center, but what we don't do is we don't put limitations around it to say like, oh, only C-suite people can be mentors. We allow everyone to either sign up to be a mentor or a mentee. And we ask a series of questions to match people together based off of what it is that they actually want to learn and where they actually want to be for their career. So again, it feels very authentic. It's very diverse just by nature of the fact that we don't exclude anyone. And I think we make the assumption a lot of the times in organizations that people always are wanting to move up. And that's not always the case. A lot of times your growth will be this way or diagonally. And people just want to feel like you're addressing their concerns with the way that they want to grow. So what is it that they want to be mentored in? It's not always leadership. So I think that, when you're working with your teams and giving them those options, it's remembering that you have to include the people who see opportunities in a less traditional way than we see opportunity, right? People, I feel like, especially in younger generations, they want to do things that feel good to them. They want to do things, that they feel are making an impact. They, not necessarily are as concerned about being in charge, but it's like, what is the purpose of why I am doing this, and am I making an impact here in the space that I'm in? Does this align really with my skill sets and my personal passions? There's that line of, oh, this is who I am at work and this is who I am at home, is going away. It's like, no, this is who I am, which I absolutely love about the younger generations. And I think a lot of times the older generations, we're resistant to it because we're kind of jealous of it. But that it is what it is. So I think, thinking about things in that way is a way, and you'll naturally develop leaders, right? Because if I'm in a space, again, where I feel comfortable, you listen to my needs and you're helping me grow in the areas that I want to grow in, that leadership acumen and skill building is going to come alongside that, because they're going to feel great about the space that they're growing in.
Absolutely. And I feel like you're also creating a space for people to develop two skills. So for the mentors, they are building leadership skills and communication skills and team building skills just by mentoring someone. And if you're not necessarily like a manager or a coordinator, and you can mentor someone, you get all of like the benefits from a mentorship program. And of course, for the mentees, you are providing this opportunity to grow that doesn't necessarily tie into like your performance reviews. And
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah. And
I
it
love
also,
that.
it helps people learn how to talk to people at all different levels in the organization too. So we have done this where we have somebody who is, a mentor to the CEO, you know what I mean? And they're not, they're, at a more junior level in the company, but they're the mentor and the CEO is the mentee. So that helps us to learn a lot, because the further you get away from the thing that you're doing, like, European Wax Center, we're a full body waxing company, the CEO isn't in the center every single day. Right. So, you can kind of get disconnected from what's happening on the ground. And through our mentorship program, we've closed that gap a little bit. You know what I mean? So by not putting those parameters and guidelines around it, it really helps us not just only internally, but externally too, with what we're bringing to our franchisees.
I love that. And I feel like it also talks about, or it speaks to the kind of culture that you have and the one that you're helping build. So very excited to hear. I feel like we have a lot of, just you hear weird stories around. And then when you hear a story about a company that's putting in the work and having these leadership positions that allow for people to get a place and see the value in your team, I just feel very honored and happy to have you here today. So I would say, not my last question, but the one before the last. How can you as a leader create a more inclusive space for your team and or your customers even?
I think you have to. So I will give a very specific example about what we do at European Wax Center, because we're a large brand and we have, over 1,000 locations across the country, right? But we also have, we're a franchisor and franchisees. So that means that they're individually owned and operated locations, which means at the franchisor level, we don't really get involved in their employment related matters. So we have to create space for them to come to us optionally. So we created this group called the Culture Champions, and it's like, hey, if the topic of DEI interests you and you want to help us drive strategy in that space, you can join this group. We meet once a quarter. Tell us what's happening in the center. Tell us how we can improve your experience from the franchisor level, and then also how we can improve the experience for the guests. So that has been incredibly helpful group to work with. They have driven the creation of our last two training programs. So one of the gaps that we've been able to close in the in-center experience was around gender diversity. And then another gap that we were able to close was around disability inclusion. So we are fortunate enough that we have so many different types of guests that are coming into our centers all the time. And we realize that, hey, we have a gap here where people aren't able to, select their pronouns. We have a gap here where people are coming into the center and they maybe using a mobility aid. And we want to make sure that, we're addressing that situation appropriately in the manner that they would expect. So we partner with third-party experts based off of that recommendation and that feedback that we're hearing from the field. We partner with third-party experts in those areas, and we have them come into our center, experience what happens in the center, and then show us how to tweak the experience for those communities. And then we create training and we publish it. So that has, if we didn't have that feedback from that group that was saying, hey, this is something that comes up pretty frequently, and, we found a way to kind of work through it, but we want to make sure we're doing it right. Again, it's that intentionality around putting those processes in place. So those are two training courses that I'm really proud of that we were able to bring to the franchisees that came from the mouths of their associates.
I love that. And what I'm hearing also is that inclusion is really a work in progress. You're never truly done. And even if you put in so much effort, there's always areas of improvement. So stay open, right?
Yeah. Because they were already coming to us, right? Those guests from those communities, they were already coming to us. So I wouldn't say that our experience wasn't inclusive, but certainly there's a difference between, it's like, can I get through this experience whether then I feel like I'm welcomed into it? Like, oh, they thought about me intentionally. This piece of this experience is here just for me. Like, that feels so much better than to say, oh, they accommodated me. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
it's a different type of signaling that, I think if I'm coming into the center already and I see that, I'm like, oh, wow, they really want me here because they took the time to build this piece of the experience out for me.
Of course, and what a better way to build really strong relationships with your team and also with your customer, right? Because, ultimately you want them to stay with you for a long time, both of them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So now, before we wrap, do you have any final thoughts or any advice you would like to give to anyone on our audience?
I guess my final thought that I would leave people with is to not be so fearful. You know what I mean? Don't panic around the topic. And I think that it's important that we just make sure that we're continuing to constantly be having the conversation and evolving the conversation. And no matter what could be happening around you, know that this is always important. It always is something that is going to be meaningful for the people that are in your organization. And I think just keep talking to each other. Like, keep being genuinely curious about other people's experiences, and then do your best to not judge that experience. So that's I guess my best advice that I would leave people with. It's been an incredible journey taking on DE&I at European Wax Center. It's made me a better person and just more open to understanding different people. And some of the relationships that I've built just by doing this work, I don't think would have happened if I hadn't said, you know what, let me be more intentional about being curious. And I think if you just start there, then your whole world opens up.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what a feeling to leave on. Thank you so much, Deidra, for joining us on this very special episode and for sharing your powerful story, and all of our insights with us. This conversation has been really inspiring, and it's just a great reminder of why inclusion is important, not just for reflection, but also for action.
Yes,
thank you for joining us. Thank you to our beautiful audience for joining us again. We will leave all of the links. Check Deidra out. She's so inspiring. You want to follow her. And we will see you soon. Thank you, Deidra.
Thank you. Bye.
EventUp is brought to you by Innovate Marketing Group. To find out more, check out innovatemkg.com. And finally, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave us a rating and review to let us know what you think. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time on EventUp.